Yeah.
All right, Dolphin. Go ahead.
All right, so do we have a coin flip? Who wants to go first?
Not me.
All right, hey, somebody flip a coin real quick. Okay, here we go. Charlie, call it.
Heads.
Tails. Sorry, mate.
I'll defer.
You'll defer, so Charlie goes first?
Yes. He wants to go first. Let him go first.
I don't want to go first. I want to go last.
All right, you know what? I won the coin flip. Charlie, I already wrote it down. You're going first.
I don't want to go first. Okay.
All right, you'll each have 5 minutes, and give me just a second to get my timer.
Okay.
So that we can do this.
Is it an egg timer?
No, it's a cell phone.
Oh. Okay.
Just like pretty much. I know I'm incredibly boring. I should have had something funny to say.
He was going to take off an article of clothing every minute. I mean, that could be kind of fun.
I wonder, I just imagine that it's egg time. We're having to keep turning it over and over and over and over and over.
Dolphin might have had a bit too much meat tonight. I don't know.
No, actually,
There's no
I haven't.
such thing.
I haven't been drinking for like a few days now.
Oh, that's a shame. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll be quiet.
Oh, Jesus.
All right, are we ready?
Kind of. Hold on.
Have we been going live this whole time?
Yes,
Yeah.
we have.
Well, welcome to the Academy Debate Show. Tonight we ask the question, can the Korean peace hold?
On
Arguing
NPR.
for, we have Aircraft Sparky, and arguing against, we have Charlie. Let's go ahead and start our opening arguments with Charlie. Charlie, you have 5 minutes. You may begin.
Okay, so I think that peace with North and South Korea will not sustain because it's a conflict that's been going on for like 70 years. And if you can take, for example, like Germany, where it was split between the East and the West, that was only split for what, like 40 years, and that joined, and it's not been, let's say, perfect, but it kind of worked a bit better. But I think with North and South, if you try and join those two together to make them work together, where like economically, I think it's going to be a very like difficult thing for them to both work as a whole nation, and not to be there some kind of like jealousy or distrust between the two. Especially considering that there are still missile silos ready to take down any weapons that come out of North Korea. So it's not like everyone's sort of trusting North Korea right now, and it's whether they will ever like fully trust North Korea. Also, the other thing is, like Chair said earlier, their testing silo thing has apparently collapsed. Now, to me, this kind of sounds like Kim Jong-un is just buying time. Like the capabilities of being able to continually manufacture weapons or increase their capacity of their weapons are sort of stymied. So they kind of have to kind of do this thing of like, oh, okay, yeah, let's all be friendly. Because really, like, I can't see it that North Korea have never been like, obviously Donald Trump has pushed this thing of like, oh, go on, like press the button, I dare you kind of thing. But I really much doubt that it's been a case of that's enough for Kim Jong-un to just go like, oh no, that's it, hands off. I'm gonna back up now. I'm gonna become a sensible world leader. Just look at how his persona has changed in this whole sort of period where he's becoming more peaceful. Like it's a complete kind of like PR makeover. It doesn't really feel like something that sort of sticks. Like he's actually real. It just looks like a coat of paint that's been put over him just to make him more approachable by the West and the rest of the world. And then, yeah, in terms of even from the people's standard, you're going to have people that have been deeply, brainwashed by the North Korean government that are going to have to come out and kind of go like, our country's not the best, our government's not the best, and realize that they've been lied to. So not only like peace in between North and South, but peace inside North Korea itself. You could hypothetically end up with like a civil war because the Korean people realized that they've been lied to. It's something that obviously they haven't had to come to terms with. Probably some of them have, but not on a scale of where you've been told every single day that your government's the best and that they're doing much better than everyone else is in the world, and anything you read is a lie and stuff like that. Because from the outside, for us, it seems very obvious that that's a lie, but from the inside, then it must be more difficult because you don't have the internet, you don't have this ability to actually work out what's true, what's real, and so you could end up with these very disenfranchised large group of people. Not only that, but like, what does North Korea actually offer to the world? What can it actually give to make it a viable thing for it to kind of not just get left to the wayside? Okay, so at the moment it's like this big high point. It's like, oh, North Korea's peace, blah 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 blah. But then give it another couple of years when they don't actually have anything to offer to the world to provide us with any kind of payback kind of system. Are they going to go, oh, well, fuck the world? Like, look, they just dropped us. They don't care about us. We're going to go back to being horrible pricks. And yeah, I can't see how two countries that have been so opposed to each other, and not just that, like even the Japanese.
15.
Okay. A whole kind of area of just that very much distrust and hate, how that can just go to like nothing. And also it's like, how does that work in terms of like, does North Korea then have to give up everything?
So wrap it up.
Cool. So yeah, basically, yeah, that's it. I can't be asked.
Excellent job, Charlie. So bouncing over to aircraft. Aircraft, why don't you inform Charlie why we shouldn't just say to hell with these North Koreans and let them all die?
In 1953, the U.S., South Korea, North Korea signed an armistice, creating the DMZ on the 38th parallel. We're now looking at 65 years of a complete military stalemate, a standoff, if you will, compared to Germany that had 44 years of control from the West and the East, with West and East Germany. There's 44 years total that Germany was separated. However, when the wall came down, Germany actually had to go through this reunification process. This process was not easy. It did take some time, and it still is being worked on today. The difference between East Germany and West Germany today is still remarkably different. However, it has been sustainable. One thing that my opponent does not recognize is the fact that the cultural differences between European and Asian cultures, the Asian cultures are way more of a collective and more family-oriented culture. And we are talking about three complete generations that have been isolated from their northern or southern family. These are people who are wanting to unify. Now, the problem that actually stands in the unification of Korea is going to be the autocratic communist regime of Kim Jong-un. In order for true unification to actually occur, the South will not accept any rule whatsoever under the Kim regime. That's fair enough. Democracy rules supreme. And as soon as they open the borders to where the citizens of the North can commute down to the South, you will actually see a lot of the Northern citizens stay in the South if able to, because the South Korea is, I believe, the second largest economy in Asia today. Second to China, and just slightly over Japan. South Korea is an amazingly booming, 11th in the world, thank you. It has a booming economy and things are going great there. The Kim regime is going to have to abdicate some power, or possibly do essentially what the U.S. did with the Japanese emperor following World War II. Basically hold a placeholder's position, kind of like the Queen of England, with no real power, deferring to a parliamentary system or something. And that will be a way that it'll work. But as far as how peace is going to be sustained in the Korean Peninsula is really going to be reliant on the people and not the politicians. Because currently what is going on in North Korea is the populace is starving, while dear leader, the little fat piggy with his finger on the button, is getting fatter and fatter. One of the leading causes of death in North Korea currently is malnutrition. What is happening in North Korea is you are starting to see the people are starting to object to being ruled. And you cannot honestly maintain rule over a people who do not want to be governed by a certain regime. Eventually, the numbers collapse on themselves. So I believe what is going on right now is Kim Jong-un is seeing the death throes of his family's namesake and is looking for a way out to possibly save. Depending on treaties and actual compromises will determine if there will be some type of power for the Kim regime. However, I do believe that what we are starting to see is the start of a new peace that is sustainable over many generations, because you will see families reunited, and that is something that is beautiful.
1 minute.
Asia. And I'm done.
All right, Aircraft making his opening statement in under 5 minutes. All right, guys, now's the part of the show where we go into the debate part. Since you went first, Charlie, I'm going to go ahead and allow Aircraft to go first on the rebuttals. Aircraft, you have 5 minutes. Anytime Charlie is answering any of your questions, the timer will be paused, and as soon as you start talking again, it'll be started again. So you have 5 minutes to ask Charlie any questions or make any statements in rebuttal to his. All right? Go.
Okay. So my first question is, why do you actually think, I know in your opening statement you mentioned that because of the 65-year difference that you see amongst the two countries being divided, and actually it's probably more closer to 68 because you actually see the beginning of the Korean War started around 1960. Do you really think that time separated is really going to be that big of a deal? Because the Korean people, honestly, they do have a sense of national pride. However, their pride is as Koreans, the people as a whole, not necessarily the two individual countries. And you see this through their unification during the Winter Olympics. They were the Korean unified team, and they actually showed a lot more pride in that than what you would see between two warring factional countries. He's muted. Got to unmute the man.
My apologies, guys. There we go. You should actually, you can unmute yourself, Charlie. Can you unmute?
I see. Yeah, got you. Right. So why do I think that the time difference between Germany and Korea is different? Essentially, yeah. That's your question. So the reason why I think is that if you take it's a bigger gap. So someone could actually live into old age and be dead by the time. So you end up with a forgetfulness of what time was before, and it gives that country a bit more of a chance to actually manipulate the history in the past. So the next generation then has a different viewpoint of how history was beforehand. So, and also with the Germans, it's slightly different, because with the Germans, you had like a newer generation that rebelled against the older generation now, but that's because the older generation was at the start. So it's really kind of it's sort of like a much smaller time period than it is for North Korea. The other thing is that Germany is located centrally inside Europe, so it has multiple countries around it that have already just been inside a very big war, that can obviously you have a lot more information toing and froing. Whereas in North Korea, it's a lot more locked down. They don't, for example, have any kind of access outside of Korea to access information. So I think that the time zone that it is now, so difference between it being now in 1980 and the length of time does actually create a difference if you compare the two. That's it. I'm cool.
I believe that's his answer there, Aircraft.
Fair enough, but the difference in culture is really what I'm focusing on. The fact that Asian culture tends to evolve around more of a family-oriented deal. You're seeing families just like you saw in the American Civil War that is actually just split by an imaginary line on a map. This is going to be a huge thing, and when it comes to the history, you're talking about a history of people that have tracked their lineage back to over 2,000 years through Buddhism. So history is actually a huge part of their history. It's something that they love and they relish in. And honestly, in the grand scheme of things, especially with this culture, 68 years is a very short time.
Yeah, the thing is though, like you said, it's just an imaginary line. It's a big fuck off no man's land between two countries. Whereas the divide between South and West Germany was a very small no man's land, where they actually did have access through. So you did have people up to a point. You have people going from South and from East and West Germany. And also the other thing is you're talking about family, you're talking about Asian, like their culture and stuff like that. The thing with Germany is actually the West Germans actually helped out the East Germans, because this was it's basically for West Germany to take on East Germany was a humongous financial burden. So the West Germans helped out the East Germans because of that kind of thing of like, we're helping out my fellow man. This was very sort of seen like during the financial crisis with Greece. When Greece went down, the German people were very resentful of supporting Greece, despite the fact that in the 80s they had supported East Germany, because they weren't German, they were only European. So why would they bail out the Greek people when they're not their fellow man, they're not their fellow countrymen? So I don't think it's really the same to say that like, oh, the Asians are different, they have a more of a family thing. I don't really think that's the same. Like, I think it's just a human quality to actually care about your fellow man. It's just depending on if you've lived in a country that's had like very small amount of communication and like almost like families have been split apart by like nearly 70 years. Like if you split a family up for like nearly 70 years, that's like 3 generations you miss out. Like that's not, you'd start to give less of a fuck. In all honesty, I don't know numbers, but I would slightly assume that North Korea has a smaller population than South Korea, if I had to guess. And does that, like, if you've got a very small amount of people that have been on the other side, like, I don't see how they would just kind of welcome them with open arms. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is a different psychological thing to Asian culture, but I don't know. I think it's more of a human quality of like, you don't, like, you've punched me in the face, so I'm not going to trust you. Like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, that's my answer.
Fair enough. And you've seen over the decades, there was actually some form of an underground railroad that where South Koreans would actually try to smuggle North Koreans across the border. Of course, there is that, I believe it's a 3/4 of a mile no man's land, which is actually a very apt description, as you put it. I've been there. It's very interesting. It's very tense. But the most interesting part that I see with what's going on is the fact that the people are calling for it, the people on both sides. One of the leading causes of death is malnutrition in North Korea right now. So this is probably one of the reasons that is actually driving this. My question to you is, yes, there will be some tension, there will be some mistrust, but how can you deny an entire country of people, once they see the prosperity that is in the South versus the North, how are you actually going to ask them to stay in their current mode of governance and be happy and not rise up against those in power?
Sorry, say that again.
How are you going to expect a group of oppressed, underfed, malnourished, and demoralized people as a whole? How are you going to ask them to be okay with their current form of government once they're finally exposed to South Koreans' wealth and their prosperity?
I wouldn't say that. My understanding of the debate was that if peace could be sustainable. So it's whether, like, I'm not saying, oh no, you shouldn't give them the chance and denying them the chance of a unification. My point is that I don't think that unification would last maybe 20 years.
I'd say that's a fair thing. I think because the Korean people as a whole has never truly latched onto the South Korean versus North Korean identity. I believe they've always identified themselves as Korean. I believe that'll be more of a unifying.
But that's
deal.
Your opinion.
Well, that's what I've noticed from being there.
But that's only your first. Like, there's no. Do you know what I mean?
I lived there for 2 years.
Okay, fine, but that's still
that's my experience. That is my experience.
Yeah.
But I am telling you, everything that I learned from them, because I tried my best to learn their culture and even some of their language, which I was horrible at, by the way. It is a prevailing thing.
Aircraft. My point is that with like a country, you can live in different parts of the country and you can have different views on something. For example, in the UK, the northern cities that are most hit by Brexit voted for Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It doesn't, because you stayed in one place for 2 years does not mean that you know how that country perceives the other country.
Well, basically what I'm trying to say is they don't have the same nationalistic tendencies that you would see in Europe or even the US. You're in the UK, but you would probably consider yourself English, where if you traveled north a couple of hours, they would be Scottish, and there's not a goddamn thing you can tell them otherwise.
No,
also, if you traveled a little bit west to where the goat fuckers reside, they're Welsh. If you cross a little river, there's the Northern Irish.
So you're talking about Asia. So there's not a big kind of thing between China and Japan then?
Well, there is a rivalry between China and Japan.
And you were saying about being not so nationalized. Aren't the Chinese incredibly nationalized?
The Chinese, even they have the different provinces. They consider themselves to be Chinese as part of the Chinese people. Not that they're Szechuan or whatever small subdivision of their country is.
No, but they're still quite national.
Yes. Well, they look at themselves as a people as a whole.
22nd.
Yes, where you see in Europe, people will divide themselves up into different districts. And that's the difference that I'm trying to allude to. Like I'm from Mississippi in the US, but I live in Oklahoma, but I'm not an Oklahoman. I'm a Mississippian. But overall, generally, I'm American. They don't really have those big distinctions over there.
That's your rebuttal time. Well done, Aircraft. Now, Charlie, why don't you please go and tell us why we shouldn't just glass the whole peninsula?
I wouldn't say it's so kind of vulgar as that, but you know what I mean.
All right, fair enough. You have 5 minutes to ask any questions. Anytime that you stop, that Charlie begins answering, I'll stop the clock, and then we'll restart it when you start answering questions. Again, hate to repeat the rules, but those are them.
That's fine. Okay. So Aircraft, how do you think that having a country that's incredibly poor is going to, so you basically, all these people, you basically say like, look, you have free reign now, you can leave, the door is open. Do you think that those people aren't just going to fucking scatter? Which then could possibly create a problem in South Korea where they then suffer from unemployment. This is a country that has quite a fragile economic climate. In fact, it has grown very quickly. And they do this by being very underhanded in their business techniques. I know that South Korea is notorious for opening up like small like restaurants inside of houses and stuff like that. How do you think that they'll cope with this influx of people that basically are economic migrants flooding into the region, which is obviously not designed to cope for this many people? Or, for example, how's that going to work in terms of, like I said, like if you have this kind of like us and them situation of that the North Koreans sort of look at the South Koreans and kind of go like, why can't we want to be unified? We want to have what you have. You must give us what you have, because now we're unified. We're all one thing. And it's a hard sell to the South Korean people to say like, oh yeah, no, let's increase taxes so we can form this unification. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, that's simple. This is going to have to be done incrementally. Same thing happened when the wall came down between East and West Germany. You had to allow the people from the poorer, more oppressed country to slowly integrate. This is something that is still not fully complete. Even today, you can still see the death calls of communism when, long after the Iron Curtain has fallen. On June 12th, 2018, the beginning of that is actually going to start, and I guarantee you that plans have already been drawn up because there's actually a date set for this summit. This summit will be between Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump. Let's be honest. Dates like this are not set until there's actual conditions already established. This is basically a PR stunt. What you're going to see is people from the North suffering from sort of a Stockholm syndrome. But not only will they, still have some of the beliefs of those who have held them captive over so many years, they're also going to be like a starving African in Ethiopia. You can't just feed them everything they want immediately because they're going to rupture their organs and die. So you're going to have to give them little bits of freedom here and there. And it's going to have to be well regulated to prevent any type of severe problems and backlash. But it's been done before in the past, and I don't see why it can't be done now.
Okay. I think that you did highlight there as a very slight thing of if you do it very slowly, the issue is that you could end up with a civil war where it's like these promises are made to the North Korean people of this unification, of making their lives better, and it actually doesn't happen as fast as they think it's going to happen, or the change doesn't happen, in which case you end up with a civil war. Which is different to obviously like with East and West Germany, because during East and West Germany, the Soviet Union was collapsing on itself. Mm-hmm. It's a thing of, and the thing is that the collapse of the Berlin Wall was by mistake. It wasn't a organized thing. That was a call that wasn't supposed to be made.
Well, essentially, the North Korean government is in a free fall right now. When the Iron Curtain fell, it was due to economic crisis, and because of the constant besiegement of all trade and everything, and the complete isolation of North Korea, you are starting to see that capital running completely dry. Like I stated previously, one of the leading causes of death in North Korea is malnutrition and disease. One of the biggest parts of that has been the international isolation. Yeah, it's one thing that I can say that the Kim regime has done well is they maintain rhetoric. And so they aren't promising all that much right now. What you would consider to be a nothing promise is a huge promise to them. So one thing that communist and dictatorial authoritarian organizations really have the lion's share of good on is propaganda. They know how to control information. If you watch any North Korean broadcasts, you will see they keep very tight-lipped on what's going on right now because they don't want to get the people's hopes up, because they are worried about a civil war. But that civil war has never ended from 1950.
Okay. What was I going to say? Fuck. Yeah, so like you're sort of saying about the very fact that they've had economic sanctions. Why is it now? Why is it now that it's an issue? Why is it now it's an issue with the economic sanctions? Why wasn't it an issue years ago?
Because
why is it?
Because China has finally been brought into the fold to actually upholding those economic sanctions, and so has Russia. It used to be that China and Russia were back supplying to North Koreans. Well, Russia is in an economic problem itself, and China is trying to become the largest economic powerhouse in the world right now, and they can't do that and still supply North Korea under the table. In fact, China was caught recently on satellite trading oil with North Korea in the Korean Sea. I think it's Korean Sea. You have to fact check the body of water. But they were actually caught by U.S. spy satellites transferring oil from a tanker from China to North Korea, and they were called out internationally. And so China kind of got caught with their pants down, and so now they're playing the good boy right now. And so North Korea's lifeline has essentially been cut off. So this is an act of desperation. Make no bones about it.
Okay. So essentially, it's not a case of unification wanting. It's basically just a trying to back out of a bad situation.
Well, honestly, the people want unification. The people on both sides of the 38th parallel want unification. The only thing that's truly been a hindrance to that has been the Kim regime. But now that all of his lifelines are starting to be cut off, yes, he is getting a little bit desperate. And so, yes, this could be him trying to back out of a bad situation. But once you expose these people to the freedoms of the South and the prosperity of the South, there is no way that the people will allow the Kims to maintain that stranglehold that they've had now for 65 plus years.
Okay. So if you was going to be peace in the region, who would actually take charge?
Oh, well, simple. The U.S. is not going to allow anyone but itself and South Korea to actually be the dominating voice through this. That's just a matter of how it's going to happen, especially with someone as arrogant as Donald Trump pushing the deal. And President Z or Zim or whatever the fuck his name is over in China really isn't privy. He really isn't part of this discussion. So his influence is going to be limited. Right.
But my point is that if it's a case of, like I said before, someone is taking over the whole region, even if it is America, do you not think there could be a distrust from the North Koreans because the South Koreans essentially take over from Kim Jong-un, which then leaves them in a situation of, well, this hasn't got better. Nothing has changed. And you end up with a civil war because it's not like a sort of a share. It's more of a basically a takeover.
Well, it essentially is going to be basically a takeover. And yes, there is going to be this trust, but it's going to be one of those deals that you're going to have limited trust on both sides with some verification. That's why you've seen such goodwill gestures as 3 hostages or 3 political prisoners that have just been released from Pyongyang this week, given up to Mike Pompeo coming back to the United States.
Right.
So this is the beginnings of trying to show some trust. And then what's going to happen is, as they talk of denuclearization, you're going to see a call for unfettered access to all nuclear test sites, just like the one that recently collapsed. The reason why people know that it collapsed is because you could actually read that on seismic telemetry. Yeah. So it is going to be a trust. It is going to be a trust, but completely verify everything from the west side towards North Korea. And North Korea is going to have to step out there with a little bit of faith. And they're going to do it because it's a necessity at this time. People do what has to happen in order to survive. And I believe that is exactly what Kim Jong-un is doing currently.
Okay. So what do you think will happen to Kim Jong-un after this situation?
Honestly, I've been thinking about this, and I'm actually, to satisfy I believe his requirement. I believe that he is going to end up holding a position of ceremony, kind of like the Queen. No real power, but a figurehead type person, just like the U.S. did with the Japanese following World War II.
Right.
And I think if they go along that line where, the Kim family truly loses no wealth or privilege, but they lose some of their power, I think he'll be willing to accept that in trade.
Right.
And I believe that you will start to see, you'll see a rise happen in North Korea, 10, 15 years down the line, of where some of the old regime hardline communists are going to go back into politics, and they are going to be welcomed in open arms. But as you've seen in Russia with like Putin, who was a former KGB commander,
Yes.
He may win these votes and stuff, but he still hasn't brought Russia back to pure communism or whatever bastardized version of communism. I know they're socialist and probably going right now in the, but because it isn't real communism, real socialism, because it's a state. But no, they'll never be able to return back to what they were, because now the people are going to see the benefits of being within the fold of the world.
But if those benefits aren't made readily available, surely that would leave them disenfranchised.
Well, readily available comes in quotation marks, because the pace at which this happens is going to be quite regulated to prevent from self-harm. Just like with the starving child,
Yeah.
You don't feed them too much.
Okay, I'm out of questions.
Moderator?
Oh, sorry, I had my microphone off. I was like, yeah. So anyway,
it's an easy mistake to make. It's fine.
Yes, and you don't notice it until somebody says moderator, and you're like, "What? That wasn't me."
Wait a minute, I'm the moderator.
Well, I'm gonna have to give you some props there, Charlie. You pulled off a 5-minute question and debate section in 4 minutes. Well done. All right, so at this point, I have a couple of questions for each of you, and we'll see how you do. First of all, I'm going to start with Charlie. Charlie, earlier in the debate, you were talking about what North Korea has to offer the world, and knowing that it doesn't really have anything to offer the world, it's going to become more isolationist again. However, North Korea has significant mineral wealth, and pretty much the rest of the world knows about this. Most of the rare earth metals that we find in our batteries and electronics today can be found in large quantities in North Korea. Do you not consider this to be a massive benefit and trade opportunity for the North Koreans to reunify not just with the South Koreans, but with the rest of the international trade community?
Okay, so if those mineral depots exist now, why are they not selling them now? And also, like, would that not also make the North Korean people kind of pissed off that their country is basically just like, oh, okay, we want to get in there, we want to mine that shit, then what? Then what happens? And the same thing applies of like, well, okay, we're going to slowly release this goodwill to you, but also we're going to come and like rape your country. I can't see how from a North Korean perspective you can kind of sit there and go, yeah, sure, come in, yeah, fucking take everything, yeah. Oh, you don't want to give me stuff? No, that's fine, that's okay. You go home, you go have fun. I can't see that ending well.
Well, it's kind of more of the same, don't you think?
What do you mean?
All right. No. It was just a basic question. These aren't actually meant. I'm not debating you. I'm simply moderating.
No. I know. I'm just saying. Like, that's my answer. Is that I can't see it ending well if you're going to sit. Okay, they have that to offer to the world. Fair enough. But whether that then means that it then causes anguish and unruliness, then that I think will happen.
All right, and my second question for you is, you said that they could maintain a sustainable peace for between 20 and 30 years before you believe it would break down. After 20 or 30 years, you have about 1 to 1.5 generations. Do you not think that that would create a stable enough backdrop for a complete cultural shift back into a unified Korea?
This is the point I was trying to make, is that it depends on how well it's basically like it's a difficult thing to say, because it depends on the next sort of 5 to 10 years of how well that actually integrates and how well the goodwill is actually dispersed across North Korea. Because if it's done in a poor manner or unsanctioned, or it's done in a way that's too slowly, you could end up with something. Look at something like talking about your previous question, like Venezuela, who's got massive amounts of oil reserves, but what are they? They're in a massive shithole, like, because it's just not been done properly. So it to me, it just seems like, yeah, I've got lost. Sorry. Sorry, repeat the question.
Is 23 or 20 to 30 years of peace?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. So I think that if that sort of 10 to 5 year process, if it doesn't work out correctly and does end up in some kind of situation, you end up with this generation of distrust, where the generation before says, oh no, we had it better, we used to be this, we used to have the world on its fucking knees, we used to be able to like command it with our, like, say that, oh, we had the world shitting themselves, thinking that we were going to cause the Third World War, and now look at us, we're like bottom of the bottom of the bottom. And so that's why I think in 20, 30 years time, it will end up of being this civil war, where just like, no, we should be up here, but actually we're down here.
All right, and over to aircraft. Aircraft, my questions for you are, will connections with history really help Korea if, for instance, the North starts claiming ownership over national symbols such as Yushun Sun or other artifacts of Korean history?
If you look at Asian history in the macro, you'll see that history is a huge part, regardless if you're Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, or whatever. They kind of grasp onto that. It's part of the lore that is these people. As far as North Korea trying to co-op and claiming that they own every portion of it, as I said before, North and South Koreans generally do not really identify themselves as I'm North Korean or South Korean. They already identify themselves as a Korean people. This isn't a very odd thing that you see in Asian culture. They look at the macro and not the micro. Where you will see their splitting up is basically the roles of peasants versus royalty or political class, what have you. Today in Japan, you still see this hardcore holding on to samurai culture and imperial culture. And everyone can trace themselves back, just like you'll see in America. You'll always have that one person that says, well, I'm related to this Indian princess. I don't know about like in the UK if you see that kind of things, but they really hold strongly to their genealogy. And yes, there will be some attempts to co-opt, but I think what is more important is the fact that those rare earth minerals are going to be available to the world, which is going to bring in a new prosperity into the northern section of the Korean Peninsula. And I believe the people are going to see the benefits of that. And that is going to actually push them over the edge to want to stay in more of a free and open market. I think that is actually the more important thing to focus on, is what benefits will they derive from interaction with the rest of the world.
All right. My second question for you is, you mentioned earlier that you spent 2 years living in Korea. Now, recently, upon being appointed the God Emperor of North Korea, Kim Jong-un legalized a handful of male haircuts and female haircuts, as well as, for the first time ever, pizza.
Yes.
Now,
with corn.
yes, with these kind of what we would consider everyday common items suddenly being allowed for the first time, being really huge gestures in North Korea. What kind of cultural and psychological shock is it going to have on the people of North Korea when they do see the way the rest of the world behaves, and will they be able to cope with it, or do you think that they might be too far gone?
They're going to cope with it just like most Western cultures have. They're going to have epidemics of diabetes and obesity. Basically, what's going to happen is there's going to be a huge economic void that is going to be filled with franchises and things like that. Big box companies are going to start coming in, and they're going to exploit these people, and they are going to live in excess just like the American and Europeans do. And it really depends on their cultural identity if they will be able to fully recover, or will they go over the edge like you've seen in America. Look at this body, body by Coke. It really depends on what they hold on to. If they go fully materialistic, you are going to see more obesity. You're going to see more diabetes. If they go more traditional, you are going to see more of the health conscious, as you see in Japan. It truly depends on how quickly all this is introduced to them and how the elders actually allow things to come in. Because honestly, they still believe in respecting your elders. And as long as there is still an old grandma there to set them straight, Mama will do that.
Excellent. All right. Now, my last question is actually for both of you. I'm going to let each of you answer it in turn. Charlie, I'm going to have, since you haven't spoken in a while, I'm going to have you go ahead and answer it first.
Okay.
Pronounce this word. Can you pronounce this word?
Nuclear.
All right. And now for aircraft.
Nuclear.
All right. Well, aircraft, you got it right this time. You're saying it wrong the whole time. So points lost there, gained back now. And Charlie, you're on easy. You're on even. So
good.
Anyway. No, I didn't have any serious question for both of you. Actually, I did, but you both screwed me up with that one in the debate. Anyway, that brings us around. Chair, do we have audience questions?
That's one thing. That's something first. Can you bring that back up again? What did the top of your notepad say?
Oh, I don't know.
So like that notepad that you had.
Yeah, my wife
that you had open with other programs.
my wife notes all the stuff that I leave open, like that note you had open the other day when you were playing that game, or it's hilarious.
Oh, okay. We don't really have any audience questions from what I can see, but I do have two questions that you can both answer. The first one would be, well, you kind of already answered this a little bit before, but do you think that
just do it again?
Do you think that Kim Jong is doing this because it benefits the people, or because it's going to benefit him politically? Like, is it a political move, or is it, an actual decent thing to do that he's doing?
You legalized pizza, dude.
With corn.
With corn.
He's just got to get around to legalizing weed, then he'd be fine.
Weed is legal in North Korea.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just if you can get it, because if it's found, they will cut it down, they will burn it, and they will probably hang you for growing it. But if you can get it smuggled, yes, it's completely legal, just as long as you're not caught.
Nice. So the other question though was, what does a long-term Korean peace treaty? What benefit does that give the rest of the world?
More Korean people.
More Korean people.
Yeah, when you think about
less
K-pop,
fears of
is this
World
really
War
a
II.
good thing?
Yeah, we could just make more Gangnam Style.
Honestly, do you really want to know what the true benefit of a unified Korean peninsula will be?
Yeah, what's that?
You're going to see a reduced price in electronics across the world because of the surplus of rare earth minerals found. So no longer will we have to rely on slavery and the bloodshed down in the Congo and the Sudan to get these minerals. Now we're going to get them off of starving Asian people who we can exploit for a cheaper price.
Exploit different people.
Yes, it's really all it's about is trying to make my iPhone cheaper.
And that won't end in a civil war at all.
There was a brief comment in the chat that we could talk about. He was talking about the fact that no one mentioned the fact of how pissed off China will be if they unify.
I don't think China's going to be too pissed, honestly. I think they'll be a little perturbed. Oh, great. Another Western power on our borders. Oh, here we go again.
And that's honestly going to be the bigger deal. With the call for denuclearization, Kim Jong-un is going to call for a lowering of U.S. presence in the Korean Peninsula. Currently, there's about 35,000 soldiers stationed in South Korea alone, not to include the 25 to 40,000 soldier, sailors, and airmen stationed in Japan. There is going to be a call for withdrawal for that, and that is partially influenced by China. China wants to see an end to Western imperialism, as they like to call it, in their region. But I don't believe the U.S. is going to give up too much of that. I could see Korean Peninsula strengths maybe dropping to around 25,000 troops in the peninsula with a QRF of about 70 to 60,000 in the region. Yeah. But as far as complete U.S. withdrawal from the Korean Peninsula, I don't see that one happening anytime soon.
I do have to say, though, Charlie, I think you did better than you thought you were going to.
Yeah. Considering that it was quite good. Completely unprepared. Just fuck it. Let's just do it.
It was a good discussion, though. Honestly, it's been really good.
Made some very good arguments. Anyway, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and make your 2 minutes worth of closing arguments each, since you've both rambled on so much that I'm sick of your voices. Just finish the damn show and let's go. I'm kidding. You're doing great. We'll start off. You want to do the coin flip, or does somebody want to go first?
Coin flip? I'm fine with coin flip.
All right. You called it last time. Aircraft, call the coin flip and go.
I got to go for that tail.
Oh, son of a bitch. Heads again. Oh, wait. It was tails last time. No.
Yeah.
Heads.
Okay. Right. So, I didn't really think about the idea of how China would actually proceed with that. I like I was saying about the possibility of it being not a peaceful region. And it depends what you'd count as peaceful. Would you count as like civil unrest as peaceful, or would it actually have to be like an actual war for there to be unpeaceful? Could it be hypothetically that China does get pissed off and they do it like I said, they try to smuggle oil across in an underhanded measure? What stops them from doing things in the region to destabilize it, to cause it to be for it not to go smoothly, or even Russia as well? Any reason why they can't underhandedly, like the same sort of way that you have it in Syria, where Russia will fuck with America's shit? Why could that not happen also in Korea? They sort of go, well, we want to piss the Americans off. Let's just fuck around with North Korea. Let's arm them. Let's call some shit. Like, let's leave some propaganda. Why could that not happen? It seems like a very big power keg. Like the whole thing of building up, the whole thing of like, oh, it's World War III and all that kind of shit, that kind of emotion and rhetoric. After it's become like a peaceful process, it's a power keg. And like Aircraft said, like the gluttiness and the kind of thing. That's a hypocritical thing to say, because at the same time you're also saying that it's going to be easy, softly, but also oh no, they can gouge, they can become obese. It's like, well, when does that happen? Like, or it's oh no, we're just gonna enslave them and just use them for minerals. Like, it just doesn't seem fair.
All right. Well argued, Charlie. And your response, Aircraft.
Well, life isn't fair. People are going to be exploited as long as they're dumb enough to be exploited. As far as for Russia and Syria happening in North Korea, the only reason why Russia is in Syria because due to EU sanctions on Russian oil, it has actually caused Russia to build a pipeline through Iran, Iraq, and Syria to get back in and across through the Med. That's the whole reason for the conflict in Syria currently. There is no actual geopolitical reasoning for Russia to actually support North Korea today. However, as far as China would possibly want to manipulate the situation because it could affect their ability to be a regional power, although there is more benefits for them to stay good boys and play within the world market properly to be allowed more access to the rest of the world, because China, just like North Korea, has suffered some sanctions on them for their underhanded dealings. So I believe their greed alone will keep them more in the good. As far as what will keep the peace in Korea, it's going to have to be done in moderation. Nothing can be done open the floodgates overnight. I believe that all the leaders of these countries do actually recognize this potential problem and will try to their best to safeguard it. Do I think that it is sustainable forever? That's yet to be seen. But I think that within my lifetime, I am hoping, and I firmly believe that there will not be any more war in the Korean Peninsula as long as I'm alive. Maybe my children might see that, but I'm hoping not. I think that if we follow previous models used, I believe that there's a lot of hope and opportunity that can be done here. Done.
Moderator.
Excellent. Well done. And right on time, too, by the way. Anyway, that concludes the competition part of our debate for the night. At this time in the night is when we call on our staff to announce the winners and the score. So, without further ado, I introduce you all to Chairview.
Oh, I'm the one picking the winner tonight, am
Unless Placeholder, are you doing the scoring?
I thought I was.
Excellent. And let me all introduce you not to Chairview, but to Placeholder.
No, fuck that guy.
I know, right? All right. So I have decided on a winner, and Aircraft Sparky, I think, had the stronger argument in favor of unification. Now, if he'll maintain this victory if he never does that again, and if he doesn't dab on screen. But
now, that was not a dab, to be honest, okay, because I didn't do the whole thing with the head.
Oh, I know, but it's a very fine line.
Yes, it is. It is. And I wanted to avoid that, so I did not dip the head.
So the main arguments that I picked up on from Charlie was mainly there's been too much time. The indoctrination is too intense on the people that they have no idea what it was like beforehand, which is not unreasonable. Life expectancy within North Korea is significantly shorter, and there have been, I think, 2 or 3 full generations to have lived and died within that span of like 70 years. That's not that's actually a good argument. However, bringing up that the unified Korean Olympic team is showing both North and South Korean citizens, North and South Korea working together in some respect, was a good rebuttal to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Aircraft Sparky, you were relying a little too much on personal experience, and for that you were rightly called out on, but I don't think the comparison between East and West Germany was necessarily appropriate. It's an entirely different situation. I understand that it's similar ideologically speaking. Communism is involved, but not all communism is the same. Mao's communism was different than Stalin's communism or Pol Pot's communism. It comes down to what part of the world that they're in. To say all Asian cultures share specific things in common and that can be expected to be maintained within the North Korean regime also wasn't necessarily a very strong argument. Let's see, I'm going through my notes while I'm doing this, so bear with me. It's not terribly well organized. I just opened a notepad and was typing while you guys were talking and trying to keep up. Now, the biggest argument in favor of unification is that it is something that most people within North and South Korean areas that we were able to get data from want. It's something that certainly South Korea wants. We don't know if North Koreans actually want this. Unfortunately, we just can't get enough information out of the region. It's not necessarily an issue of getting info into the region as much as it is getting it out. However, it would definitely be more beneficial to the North Koreans to unify. And I think that the writing's on the wall for the Kim regime. Bringing up that it is that the North Korean Underground Railroad smuggling people out, that's definitely the best indication that it's a popular idea, given that it's increased over the last few years. Within a country, there are regional differences, even within small nations, was certainly a good argument in favor of Charlie's side, and that no view is going to be typical. However, with some Asian cultures, you generally do tend to see international competition on a nationalistic sense rather than intranational competition. You don't see much in terms of like people from the Hunan province hating people who are from the Sichuan province. Like it's just not something that we tend to see in China, and it's not something we tend to see within other Asian countries as well. And Japan is also a good indication of this. I think in order for any side to be declared a clear winner, there are too many unknowns. Some of the concerns that Charlie brought up were definitely ones that I feel weren't properly addressed, but it's not up to us to address them. That's the people that are actually doing it. I'm glad that Aircraft Sparky brought up the June 12th reunification summit. Everybody, please watch the summit. Please watch the summit. The biggest indication that the North Korean regime is on their way out is North Korea is in free fall. Like the Kim regime has lost all of their allies in the region. Russia and China want nothing to do with them because of economic sanctions. And South Korea can cope with the people given their economic growth and output over the last 10 to 15 years. They're second in the region, 11th worldwide. Now, as the debate went on, the main concern kind of seemed to shift from not necessarily being focused on the people that were affected by this, but rather who would be in charge of it. And nobody wants Kim Jong-un in charge of anything. It would not be good for stability within the region. It wouldn't be good for stability globally because he's kind of just insane. All of the Kims are and were. There are too many things that Xi Jinping, China's president, doesn't know, and therefore it's in his best interest not to act. The North Koreans don't trust anyone except their own government, and they don't really trust their own government to begin with. So having a takeover and the fact that you both addressed it as a takeover, that's what it is at least seeing it with clarity on both sides. Bringing up progress such as those political prisoners being released into Pompeo's custody and the problems that North Korea is having with their nuclearization program, such as their silos collapsing. They don't have the infrastructure to maintain, and they're starting to see end stages of what their regime would look like.
What are the scores?
As for the rare earth elements that are within North Korea, everybody knows that they're there. Yeah, everybody is going to exploit that, but it's not a nice way to think about it. It's just what's going to happen. I think for those reasons and a few more, I can confidently say that in this debate, Aircraft Sparky won. He had more concrete facts. He had a better understanding of the region, and was prepared. Not to say, Charlie, that you're terrible at debating. I'm just saying preparation helps.
Do I not get brownie points for coming unprepared?
You know what? I'll tell you what. I'll give you brownie points for giving Aircraft a run for his money by being unprepared. And he clearly came in with notes, and he had chart. I bet you on his computer he's got just tab after tab. He just cycling through them. Oh, yeah. So he's a handwriting man.
No. That's all my notes from today. And I was doing that during the show. Actually, no, I used to work intel on North Korea with the military. So I'm just basically falling back on my old profession. It's not really about preparation as much as I've studied that much of it.
All right. Well, well done, guys. I'd like to go ahead and wrap this up by saying this has been an Academy Debate Show. We are here every single Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, 8 p.m. Central. And we also run the Braintrust, a collective brainstorming live stream every Wednesday night at 11 Eastern, 10 p.m. Central. So check those out. Congratulations to our winner, Aircraft, and commiseration for our poor, pathetic loser, Charlie.
I hate you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good night. Tell your friends. Anyway, talk to you later.